What is up, Watch fam? Happy Wednesday and welcome to this week's collection review. I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and this week we're reviewing the collection of a young dude, a college student, I believe, from Germany. So let's get into it. All right, but before we get into it, a quick wristwatch check. I am wearing a beautiful vintage Omega that was stocked on the Theo and Harris watch shop yesterday. This is an Omega from 1940s, powered by the 30 T2 caliber. This is a really beautiful watch. Although I believe 35 millimeters, it wears markedly larger. Beyond that, the syringe hands and that patina dial, to me, I mean, just speak to the inner, geek that really loves old, durable things by brands that are historically important. That kind of speaks to everyone, but it definitely speaks to me as well. So big fan of this watch. We listed 7 or 6 new watches to the watch shop yesterday, including this Longines, this Rolex, a Tudor, a beautiful Omega, and actually a very special watch, a Cartier Tank Basculante, which if you guys haven't seen it before, has a really interesting flipping mechanism. Check that out, isn't that fun? So this watch is actually made to be like a table clock. So, which is kind of cool. It's kind of tricky, but isn't that awesome? I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Basculante. All right, let's get into Oliver's collection. Let's start off with his first vintage watch, a watch that he actually purchased from me. It's a Rolex Reference 6480. This is an absolutely beautiful watch. This is one of the first Rolexes we sold here at TNH. It's a watch that I'm extremely proud of sourcing. It's a watch that I miss very much. It features this really beautiful black dial that has kind of faded out to like a charcoal color. It's got beautiful alpha hands and a quote-unquote fancy dial. I say that because of the hour indices and how they do match in a very decorative form the alpha hands. This is a winner. I believe it's 34 millimeters. Oliver picked this watch up, I think, about 2 years ago. And I don't know if he's considering selling it, but if I were you, Oliver, I would hold on to this watch very much so. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. It's a rare piece, something you're never probably going to see again, at least on the wrist of a normal quote-unquote person. So good job on this watch, buddy. Okay, next is another vintage watch. Actually, Oliver's second watch, and the second watch he actually did buy from Theo and Harris as well. This is a Deutsche here from the 1940s, a really beautiful watch. It has a very kind of like beaten aesthetic. It was made by Zenith, and it does have a militant past, although certainly not the most famous, World War II, German army, which is my way of beating on the bush and saying Nazi watches. It still is. So I think it is kind of a cool piece, a piece that is probably appropriately valued, unlike other watches that we'll get into in a couple seconds from the same time period. But another watch, very, very cool, buddy. I'm really into these old military watches. I love how they're not perfect, how they're kind of actually beaten up. To me, it's just really attractive. So great watch. Moving on is a modern watch, a Montblanc Summit with a quartz movement that I'm not sure if you bought this yourself or if this was a gift. It does seem out of character with your other 2 watches, being that they're vintage and from top brands. So this is an interesting watch, but I'll get back to what I think about it in a little while. Next, you've got a Hublot Classic Fusion in blue with a titanium case, 42 millimeters. It's a big watch. To me, I don't know how many guys there are out there that are going to wear 34 millimeter Rolex and a 42 millimeter, Hublot. It's kind of funny, not only in the actual taste of the watches, but in the sheer size. That is kind of funny. So in sheer size, it's odd that you have such diversity in your collection. But as far as 42 millimeter watches that most people hate, I think you could have done worse. I do kind of like that it is an alternative metal in titanium. I think that is interesting. Hublot is quite famous for their usage of alternative materials, and although titanium isn't the most rare, I do think that it is interesting. And further than that, the blue dial to me is quite beautiful. Do I love this watch? No, I do not. Would I wear this watch? Probably not. Actually, no. But still, I do think that if this is where your modern tastes lean, it's not the worst thing in the world. All right, moving on and back to the whole vintage world. You've got an Audemars Piguet from the 1980s. I believe it's a reference 14790, which is actually what I have right here. These are amazing watches. The value that they pack is incredible. They're not cheap. I'm not sure what you paid, but they're worth anywhere between $9,000 and $12,000. But I do think that their size alone at 37 millimeters is extremely attractive. I love the Genta design. I think that, you know, of course it's not a must-have, because that just sounds like a dick to say that anyone must have a $10,000 watch. But in this bracket, at this $10,000 level, I think it packs a lot of value next to, let's say, a two-tone Submariner. So great, really, really top quality pick on this one. And his next watch is another one that is just equally phenomenal. It's a yellow gold Rolex DayDate with a beautiful mint silver dial. It's an 80s double quick model, I believe. But what's really special here is the Tiffany dial. This is something that you don't come across all too often, and when you do, they just carry massive premiums. I'm not sure, again, what you paid here, Oliver, but this is an expensive watch. I like the DayDate alone. I like the DayDate without the Tiffany stamp. I think it's an amazing watch, but throw it in there and you've got just this ultimately or endlessly attractive and interesting vintage Rolex, especially because you have it on a strap, although I wear them most often on bracelets. Still, with a strap, it has a much more, I think, a capability to be versatile. I think that this watch on a black strap or on a blue strap or a brown strap kind of takes all the douche out of it. It loses all the pretension or the pretense about that kind of clouds this watch. So amazing piece. And finally, you've got an IWC from the 1940s, a reference IW431. This is a very interesting watch. First of all, I think this is a watch that really is not only beautiful, but so cool, because it was literally built to be a tool, like the vintage Navitimers, right? Like the original Breitling Navitimers. This is a watch that was produced to be used, not as bling, not as a status symbol. It was produced to be used. Unfortunately, like your Zenith, but a little bit more, you know, famous for it. It was used, you know, for Nazi fighter pilots. You know, it was used to aid in the, you know, massive Holocaust. So that is kind of not a touchy subject. It's an objectively awful subject. And Hodinkee did a video about the IWC Big Pilot about a year ago. And they skirted that fact. They skirted the history. I think that when you're talking about watches like the Royal Oak, right, or like a Datejust, or like the DayDate, or like the Cartier Tank Basculante, quality in its objective form is very important. If the watch is a piece of shit, it's a piece of shit. But history and significance are equally, if not more so, important. And a watch like this, an IWC Big Pilot, the original Big Pilot, should be worth more than it is, because it's an original. It's the OG version of one of the most famous and well, or most desired watches in the world. It's a beautiful watch. It's a true tool. Unfortunately, it has one of the darkest and worst pasts you could possibly imagine. It's not fabricated. I mean, I can't imagine the kind of person that originally wore this watch. So that is kind of, you know, it kind of darkens the whole thing. Do I think it belongs in a museum? Probably. It certainly doesn't deserve to be destroyed, but I'd have a hard, I don't know if I have a hard time. I think that it's a very touchy subject, to say the least, and that's it. All in all, you've got a wonderful collection of some terrific vintage pieces. Just to recap, you've got a vintage Zenith Toy Jaeger, you've got a vintage Rolex 6480 with this beautiful black dial and alpha hands, you've got a Rolex DayDate with a perfect sunburst Tiffany dial, you've got an Audemars Piguet from the 1980s that I think is one of the most valuable Audemars Piguets on the market, price per punch ratio, and you've got the original Nazi IWC. Damn, you've got a vintage collection. There is no doubt. You have truly curated a wonderful selection of vintage watches, and I give you major props for that. But now, what do I think you should do? I don't necessarily think you should sell your Montblanc if it was a special thing to you. I don't know how much it's worth anyway, even if you do sell it. But if you, let's say you can sell it, you have no emotional attachment to it, even if it's worth 800 bucks or 700 bucks, I'm really not sure what it's worth. But even if it's worth that, put that money, I think, toward your next piece, which I believe should be a proper dress watch. And that's not because your collection doesn't have a dress watch. I don't feel that way. Plenty of people who don't need a dress watch, but because you've expressed in your email that you would like a dress watch, that this Montblanc is serving the dress watch category. If you do feel that way, If you do feel like a beautiful, well-rounded dress watch would suit you well, I do think you should pursue that and liquidate the Montblanc, if for no other reason but a lack of wrist time. Now, what are the watches that I think you should get? I really think you should take a look at Cartier. I'm a big Cartier fan, a big proponent. I love their vintage and a lot of their modern, timepieces. In the vintage world, I think that their old tanks may be too small for you. I'm not sure how willing you are to go small. Here's a photo of my Santos Dumont, one of my favorite watches of all time. This is a 29 by 29 millimeter, so it definitely is small, but I do think it's quite beautiful. Another one you can consider in a much larger way are these rectangular stepped cases tanks. My mother actually gifted one to my father for Christmas or his birthday, Christmas last year. These are incredible watches. We actually have one or two of them in stock. They have incredible presence, the decadent Cartier style, and they're straight out of the 70s. They look like something that's a perfect appropriation from an original design to the 70s funk, and I really enjoy that. Now, if you go modern, I think you have two other options. The Cartier Tortue, which is a modern interpretation of a very vintage design, and the Cartier Santos 100, another beautiful watch. It looks very dissimilar to the original Santos Dumont, whereas my example is very true to the design, but still, I think it is a very well executed, both mechanically and in design, iteration. I think it's a great watch. So either one of these watches I would definitely consider you look at. Now, if you're ready to drop another $4,000 to $7,000 in your collection, I don't know. I just don't know. Do I recommend you sell your Hublot? I might, but that doesn't mean that you should. If you really enjoy it, then hold on to it. Don't worry what all the other vintage or modern, like movement fanatics, think about your watch. If you love it, then keep it. All right, Oliver, that's it, man. At like 19 years old or something like that, you've got a better collection than most anyone, certainly myself. You've got a terrific start, but still, of course, you've got a ton of room to grow. Always remember to think about your next acquisitions. Always remember to think about where you'd like your collection to go. Where do you get the most pleasure in the watches you have currently, and how do you double down on that? That's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this week's collection review. Do not forget to check out the watches in the watch shop at theoandharris.com, and I will see you all tomorrow on Lug to Lug.